Hi, welcome back to the channel. Today, a kind of a follow-up to my playing rock guitar on keyboards. Today, it's nylon string guitar. I'm going to cover some aspects of classical nylon string, Latin style music, and some more modern music. This would also apply to steel string, acoustic guitars, pretty much equally. So it'll be good for a lot of different applications. If you remember from my other videos, mostly do composing these days. I don't play live or do any performance. So that's really where I'm coming from. The demo you just heard, if it were me and I was doing this as a cue or something to be synced to video, I would have taken it into Cubase and I would have cleaned it all up. As it is, it was just me playing live. And a very important aspect of this is, generally speaking, when we're playing guitar on keyboards, it really needs to be an ensemble setting, meaning there needs to be other players playing. We need to have that kind of support. For a little bit of jazz that I'll do later, you need a bass player and a drummer and maybe even a piano player also playing along to add to the authenticity. Of course, that can still all be done in a digital audio workstation and provide a lot of realism. Okay, I'm gonna isolate my audio here and I'm gonna give you 7 major tips with some sub-tips in there to help you make nylon string and steel string acoustic guitars sound more realistic. Let's get on with this now. This is my teleprompter today. Okay. So just like the other episode, this is not part of the seven items in my tip list, but don't use a weighted keyboard like I'm using. Use an unweighted keyboard because you need your fingers to move as quickly as possible. So the first thing, this is tip number 1, you need a great sound. And this is a pretty darn good sound. This is my favorite nylon string acoustic right now. This is Native Instruments Pick Nylon. It's part of the complete collection that I own, but you can buy it separately. I think it's like $99 or it's half price when it's on sale. And it's a really good sound. What I like about this sound is you can hear the string being picked, which really adds to the authenticity. Also, if I overdo the velocity on it, you get this overpicked sound where the string is vibrating against the fretboard. And that can be great for punctuating a line in a musical passage. Very good for doing some styles of Latin music. We'll get to that later. And I think there was quite a bit of that in the demo, at least at the beginning of the demo. Alrighty. As far as effects, delay and reverb for nylon string acoustic. That's my preference. I personally stay away from chorus, flanging, phasing. They start to make an acoustic instrument sound more electronic. So that's why I stay away from it. Not that you couldn't use it, and I think there have been times when I have used it. One thing I will do sometimes when I'm creating music and composing is I will double track the nylon string. And there's actually just a button you press in this and it automatically creates a double tracking sound effect for you. As far as steel string acoustic guitars go, just about every effect is a possibility. Flanging, phasing, chorusing, reverb, delay. There, it doesn't really matter if you're changing the character of the instrument so it doesn't sound as acoustic anymore. There's something about steel string that usually still sounds acoustic depending on how far you take it, and then you're kind of in the electric guitar zone after that. Setting it up for performance, I talked about this for rock guitar. It's a little bit different for what I do here. As far as pitch bend, I'm just using a whole step. there's no real way to pitch bend down on an acoustic guitar. Not quite true. I mean, you could bend the neck. The other thing you can do is you can pre-bend a note, play the note, and then then release the tension on the string, lowering it. And so that is a possibility. So I will be bending in both directions, keeping that in mind, but mostly bending up is what I do on nylon string acoustic. Modulation. Okay, modulation, I'm really talking here about vibrato. Here I'm using a joystick, and if I push it forward, we get modulation. The thing about it is it's kind of like orchestral libraries, like measured tremolo. That LFO is running at a certain rate, and so it's hitting at a certain time. When a real guitarist adds vibrato to a string, there's a human element to it. It's not going to be perfect. It doesn't sound robotic. I can't really vary the speed using the mod wheel here or by pushing the stick forward. But what I can do is vary the depth. And that can give the illusion that there's something human happening rather than I can go. A little bit of an illusion there, I think. The other way to add vibrato is just to use pitch bend. And so I can make it my own speed and my own depth. Something to consider when you're doing this. And I use a variety of those techniques when I'm playing. So doing that Southwest type, dry desert, cattle skulls and scorpions, you really need a steel string to make this effect sound good, but you know, the kind of sound I'm going for. It just doesn't really come across the same way with a nylon string. Velocity, we already talked about dynamics, how we can get that overpicked sound, but you should be thinking about dynamics everywhere when you're playing acoustic guitar on keyboards. A lot of these techniques I'm going to be telling you, they interlap, they overlap, they have interplay. There's time when one is fading out but another one is coming in, and dynamics are always happening. You should always be thinking about dynamics when you're playing. So, good way to punctuate a line and just add a human element to it. Last but not least are things like aftertouch and continuous control or information over MIDI. There's all kinds of things that you can do with that. What I used to do when I was doing a lot of country music production, I would have aftertouch go to pitch bend and to mod at the same time. Just a little bit of mod and just a little bit of pitch bend, but you could approximate pedal steel that way. Not really great with a nylon string acoustic here playing, but you kind of get the idea. And with a pedal steel, you're going to be bending up and down. So something to think about if you're in that genre of music, has some uses. As far as techniques go, we can do our single note lead. We also need to consider double stops. Very important. Variations on the double stop, little ditties that guitar players throw in like this. You can see on the overhead, I'm just alternating the notes. Just doing it quickly, making it staccato. Just throw in those little ditties. Guitar players do that a lot. And I'm going from a lower note to a higher note, but you can go from a higher note to a lower note. I'm sorry I'm making a lot of mistakes in what I'm saying. I have to keep repeating it. It's just I'm not reading off a teleprompter and I can't really hear myself being isolated like this. So what else? Something I call trillish. You know what a trill is? Two notes alternating, generally quickly, but it doesn't have to be quickly. By definition, it's usually faster. But what I'm talking about when I say trillish is a string of notes, kind of like a run. It doesn't have to be adjacent notes. But playing quick runs like that can add to the authenticity. And the reason is this isn't easy for guitar players to do. I find that stuff very hard to play on real guitar. But on keyboards, it's trivial. It's very easy to do. And it can sound pretty authentic, especially in a mix. Next up, something that can be very hard, strumming. There's a couple of ways to do strumming. You can do it like this, and I'll play it staccato first. And here it is rigging. It's just me holding down the pedal. That sounds okay, and in a mix it might work fairly well. But my advice to you is this. You want to spread that chord out. From the top string on a guitar, which is the low E, if not drop tuned, it's just tuned to regular pitch. It's an E, and the bottom string is an E, and they're 2 octaves apart. 2 octaves to guitar player is that much distance, or it can be. For us, it's a big distance. And when they're strumming over a larger range of notes. So we need to approximate that, which is why you heard me at the beginning in the demo do this. I have a very open E major chord here. I have the 1, the 5, the 1, the 3, the 5, and the 1 again. Okay, so that's how I would recommend you do your strumming. Another way is a lot of these libraries, including this one, have picking patterns and strumming patterns. Also, a lot of digital audio workstations will allow you to enter just chords, like an A minor chord or a G major chord, and then tell it that you want it to be a picking pattern, and it will give you some choices, and you can choose one that you like, or you can have it create some strumming patterns for you, which is very easy to do if you have that ability in your digital audio workstation or some additional software that you have. Personally, I like to write my own. Sometimes they may not sound as good as a real strum, but they're playing it the way I want it to be played. And we have to remember that guitar players can strum down and they can also strum up, and there's strumming patterns where sometimes they'll strum twice down and not strum up, and then they'll strum up twice and then down and up, all kinds of patterns. And that can get kind of complex on a keyboard, and having a program do it for you or having a library that does it for you can be very helpful. So you can check out some of this software. It's really pretty good. Number 4 on my list. Number 4 on my list is left and right hand interplay. This is a very important aspect of making acoustic guitar sound real. So I have 3 labels I'm hanging on these, and these are just my labels. They're not specific music terms. Cooperating, contrasting, and complementing. Contrasting and complementing is what I'm trying to shoot for. Cooperating is what I call this. It sounds very robotic. Now, once again, in an ensemble, that might be just fine. It might work pretty well. But what I want is some interplay between my two hands. Remember, we're trying to cover 2 octaves and more in the way a guitar player would do it. So sometimes the left hand is playing by itself, sometimes the right hand, sometimes they're both playing, but they're contrasting and complementing each other in a way that makes sense and sounds more musical, but also more the way a real guitarist would play those riffs or those patterns. Number 5, think of the style that you're playing in. This is very important. This can add to the authenticity if you have a mindset of the style that you're playing. And here I'm going to cover a little bit of classical, a little bit of Latin music, tiny bit of jazz. And so for classical music, I just want to look at 3 things: decelerandos, accelerandos, and just hard stops. Now, all of this stuff, even though I'm talking about this in a classical sense, it works fine with Latin music and with pop music, but this is where I see it a lot. If you've ever listened to Cavatina, written by Stanley Myers, played by John Williams, not John Williams, the film composer, John Williams, the famous classical guitarist, he has a way of stretching out notes when he does decelerandos. He's slowing down and making you wait. He's stretching a rubber band and making you wait, and then he lets it snap. And then you hear the next melody note, but he's making you wait. Now, I'm going to probably goof this up, but I'm probably going to overemphasize it, but you'll get the idea. So we have a little bit of a setup. Just making the listener wait. Now, obviously, if you're playing in an ensemble, you have to have all the players wait, slow down. I have a really good tip for you on this. If you're using a DAW, a lot of times when I'm composing something and I'm using something like this, and I have it in an ensemble setting, what I'll do is I'll work it all out how I want it to be, just playing it the way I'm playing it now, live. And then I'll play it into my DAW, and I'll play it in perfect straight time, or what I mean by that is right on the beat. I'll play it right on the beat, like it's supposed to be played. And then I'll create a tempo track, and I'll just add decelerandos and accelerandos where I want them to be. And that's going to apply to all the instruments in my ensemble, so everything is going to stay in time. And that's an important aspect of using this. That way you don't have to go in and play all those different parts and try to slow down at the same speed. Now, you could argue that some players are going to slow down a few milliseconds before another and whatnot, and that's going to add to the realism. I wouldn't worry too much about that. That's going to happen anyway because I'm not quantizing any of the orchestral music I'm composing anyway. And if I am, I'm using algorithms that I have that still add variability in there. So I did a decelerando. An accelerando is a little harder to play. Just like that, just speeding it up for a moment. And of course, there's a difference between tempo speeding up and just putting more notes in. You got to be careful of that. Switching from 8th notes to 16th notes, for instance, not the same. Okay, you have to actually speed up the tempo. These can be very handy, actually, decelerandos and accelerandos, in another sense when composing cues for for video or for film is allows you to hit your hit points perfectly. A little bit of fudging on time. Let's talk about Spanish style. Once again, love writing this music, but I really don't know the nuts and bolts of it. But I know what I like, and I've written a lot of it. So the way I get into Latin music really quickly when I'm thinking about it is harmonic minor. So there's the natural minor. All I'm going to do is raise the 7th tone of the scale a half step. Now most of you probably already know that, but just in case. And then what I've got is that just works great for lead. Anyway, cool. So harmonic minor, it's a good way to get into Latin style. Also, I want to talk a little bit about double stops again. Great in Latin music. Hear them a lot. You can create nice harmony that way. The other thing I like to do is tremolo. And I have a little bit of advice here. So this actual sample library has key switching. So right now I'm in an open string playing mode. Press that key right there. Now it's muted. That could be useful. Next key up, flageolet or flageolet if you prefer. And the last one, tremolo. Now, personally, when I do tremolo, I'd much rather play it myself. Doing this with a DAW and being able to play it in at like half speed and then be able to massage it a little bit will make it sound more authentic. Certainly the way it sounds here sounds probably better than... But the advantage of me using just the single notes and doing it myself, I can do accelerandos, decelerandos, and I can also control the dynamics better than I can using that canned version of it, even though it sounds, I would say, a lot more authentic. So a lot of times I'll use both doing it with single notes and using the canned version of it. Next up, jazz style. Kind of been worried about doing this because there's so many jazz aficionados out there, and I am certainly not one. I need to switch over to a jazz sound, so give me just a moment. Okay, let's try this jazz stuff. I got a jazz sound. It's program A114 on the XV88, so it should be the same on the 3080 and probably around that on the 5080. It might be the exact same one. So if you're a jazz pianist, you're going to be way ahead of all of us here. What you have to do is comp out a few chords, use some of the techniques I've already shared with you today. You can do some pretty convincing jazz ensemble stuff with using the keyboard and this sound. But it's got to be in context with like drums, stand-up bass, maybe even a piano playing. So I'm going to give you an idea. I'm not a jazz player, just gonna do some stuff. So that's just me playing by myself. But if you're an aficionado, seriously, I think you could have a lot of fun here and you could have a really good time. A couple of things I want to touch on before I close. Piped in artificial sound. Some of these libraries, including this one, will allow you to have fret noise, the player's fingers sliding across the string. Usually I'm against this. When I'm playing piano, I turn off all of that, the pedal noise, everything. I turn all that artificial stuff off. The squeaky string stuff here, I think if you have one or two in a fairly lengthy piece, it's not too loud. I think it can help sell the performance, but it's very easy to overdo it, make it too loud and just too often. Good engineers do their best to minimize those kinds of artifacts, but they're unavoidable in some playing situations. You hear professionals play and you're still going to hear that every once in a while. Unavoidable. The other thing that this library has is the player actually breathing like so, and that to me truly is a gimmick. Why not a plane flying overhead and being picked up on the mics? You know, where does it end? So I wouldn't go for the breathing, but the squeak that you get off of sliding your finger down the fretboard on the string, yeah, that makes sense to me. I hope this has been helpful to you. This was tough to put together and it's hard to wear headphones. I can barely hear myself talking, so that makes it difficult. Anyway, thanks for stopping by. Take care, and I'll be back in another episode soon.